ACCEPT is an EU-funded project that intends to develop and deliver a digital toolbox that will facilitate energy communities. Aiming in bringing together citizens, local businesses and organizations, the project will help energy communities reduce their dependency on fossil fuels, save energy, and thus be able to reduce their electricity bill. Together with Ismini Dimitriadou, who is the project coordinator and my guest for this episode, we are going to discuss how ACCEPT will achieve its goals without compromising the quality of living for the members of the communities, but ideally increasing their comfort with the assistance of smart devices. Ismini, thank you for being here with me today. And would you please describe in a few words the ACCEPT project?
Sure, Areti. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's a really good opportunity actually to be able to discuss the project with you in such a wonderful event as well. So just in a few words, basically you kind of already described ACCEPT. But what it does is there is a lot of flexibility potential now in energy communities, in households. So what the project actually aims to do is develop a suite of digital tools that will help energy communities actually untap the flexibility and be able to offer services to third parties, for example, DSOs and like aggregators, retailers, and so on, but also to its members. And it does all of that without actually, jeopardizing the comfort and the convenience of the consumer. So it takes into consideration, your comfort preferences, your schedule, and so on. So anything that it does to shift your demand, for example, to offer this flexibility I mentioned before, it does it in a way that actually respects all those things, your habits and your comfort. So pretty much this is what ACCEPT do. On the side, what we are also looking into is different business models for the energy communities themselves. So we have 4 different communities in our project, and they have brought their members into the project. What we do is we look with them business models that they can actually then implement going forward, and we do that bearing in mind that an energy community can assume different roles. For example, the role of the retailer, the aggregator, or an energy service company.
Apart from the energy communities that you just mentioned, who else participates in the project?
So we have 16 different project partners. So we have 4 communities, as I mentioned before. One is in the Netherlands, the other one is in Spain. We also have one in Switzerland and one in Greece. Apart from them, we have DSOs in the project, we have retailers in the project, we have technology partners that help us develop the digital tools I mentioned before, we have universities and engagement experts. So it's a large consortium with a lot of expertise.
I would assume that your target audience is the energy communities that are already part of the consortium, but also utilities.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. So we are targeting other energy communities, apart from the ones we have in the project. So we want to disseminate all the knowledge and help other communities participate more actively in the energy transition. But as you said before, we are also targeting utilities like retailers, aggregators, energy service companies, also DSOs. So we're offering these services to the likes of the DSOs because those kind of things help them alleviate constraints on the network. Mm-hmm. So indirectly, the project does actually concern them as well. And what is also important to say here is that towards the end of the project, we really want to have a set of recommendations for policymakers. There are a lot of constraints now, a lot of obstacles because of maybe the lack of legislation or the very slow transposition of legislation into national laws. So we want to maybe even make some recommendation that will help energy communities be more active in the energy transition.
So since you did mention not local authorities, the EU Commission, I will bring also the local authorities, and I would like to ask you, how can the EU Commission and the local authorities help ACCEPT achieve its goals?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I kind of implied it before. So one of the main things that they can do is, one, find ways to speed up the process of the transposition of national EU legislation to national laws. So there are a lot of countries now that are a bit behind with For example, the rollout of the smart meters, the framework for the energy communities. So not in every EU country we have a framework that clearly defines an energy community and what they can do. So this is one of the main things that the Commission and local authorities can do. The other thing is incentives, especially now, I think, with what is happening and the energy prices soaring. You have a new trend, for example, moving back to fixed tariff, which means that when discussing implicit demand response and dynamic tariff schemes, we cannot really apply them if you have a fixed tariff scheme implemented horizontally in areas in the EU. So I think these kind of things that maybe they can do, and more to come when the project is close to a finish. So hopefully we'll get more outcomes and more recommendations.
Well, you already touched upon a very important aspect of Europe in general. The fact that that the European Union includes many countries that are diverse. Some of them are more progressed, some of them are less progressed. And they have the local authorities with different rules and regulations. So you said that you would already like to have a more homogeneity, let's say, in a way.
Yeah.
But how can you tackle the problem that Greece has one regulatory authority, then Italy has another, then Spain another, and then you go to the north and then you have something completely different? What do you do there?
It's a really good question, actually. I think you need to build a solution that is quite flexible in that way. So you need to, have a solution. For example, what we do in Accept, we have a solution that is suitable for all the spectrum of demand response schemes. So you have explicit, implicit, you have other flexibility optimization schemes, for example, self-consumption, community level self-consumption, not only individual. So make it as flexible as you can. And then actually the instantiation of the solution per country differs depending on what you said before, the regulatory framework, the infrastructure differences that the different countries may have. So I would start with just building a solution that is flexible enough, considering all different types of schemes that you want to introduce and so on.
Exactly. You mentioned the key word here, infrastructure. So the four member states, the four pilots that Accept has, represent various levels regarding infrastructure. So is the approach and the tools of the project common to all countries, or are there differentiations?
There are some differences there. So I'll take a few examples for you. So I'll start with, for example, the fact that we have a few countries that from the four, like two of them have district assets. So one of the main things, for example, that Accept does is build solutions specifically for the management of those district assets. So you have two countries with that kind of solution in place, and two countries that we cannot implement that. For example, for countries that do not have smart meters in place, one of the things that we need to consider is the installation of something like a smart meter for monitoring the consumption, which needs to be accounted for when calculating the flexibility potential. What else? So, bear with me. Yeah. The other thing, for example, that we do is in countries with no smart meters, even because there are cases where the customers are not very happy with you installing such devices. What we try to do there is implement different use cases. So in these countries, for example, you cannot do dynamic tariffs because you don't have the feedback of the consumption. But you can do things like self-consumption, for example, there. So if they have a PV on the roof, they can, accommodate the consumption using the generation that they have in place without you having to necessarily get all the data that meters would give you. So these kind of things that we try to do to tackle the differences in infrastructure.
And staying in the differences, because you mentioned another very, very hot topic, which is the consumer behavior. Because as you said, not everybody is open and willing, for example, to accept a smart meter. How do you tackle within Accept this problem for so many different countries?
It's actually very challenging. And we learn on the way. So it's a learning curve for us. So we have our engagement experts that when we first started the project, they did like a workshop with the participants from each country to see what culturally drives them to participate in the project. So then we kind of adjusted the engagement going forward and the living labs based on that feedback. You have, for example, countries that participate for increasing their sustainability, minimizing their carbon footprint and so on. And you have other countries that for them is all about saving money on their energy bills. So you learn about, the cultural differences, you adjust your campaigns, your recruitment campaigns based on that. So you can give like incentives like money to people for participating or some goods. For others is all about, for example, giving them tangible proof that they're minimizing the carbon emissions through an app, for example, that translates less energy consumption into less carbon footprint. So this is how we pretty much tackle this within the project. But it is a learning curve, and we learn on the way. There is another example that I like to mention here about our experience. For example, one of the communities was very, very strong about using their local technology vendors, which kind of makes sense. Yeah. So what we did there is we actually adjusted the project to allow them to use that vendor. So they brought, for example, IoT equipment for the households from that vendor, because they have already been doing business with them. And then we integrated the solution into the project.
And this is yet another important point, being open to feedback and being also flexible to change, right?
Yeah.
So if we take everything together holistically, Accept has quite a few aspects. One is consumer centricity. The other is the regulatory reform that it wants to bring. Infrastructure, digitalization. Which one of those aspects is the most pressing or the most important for the EU grid, energy grid, right now, you would say?
I think it's actually convincing energy communities and consumers, prosumers to participate more actively into the energy transition. I think if we can manage to get them on board, we have a real chance of actually bringing this transition that we have all been discussing. And especially now, as I said before, it's with the energy prices and what is happening, it's even more difficult to convince these people to participate in such projects and going forward to actual, schemes and energy market schemes. Because it feels like at the moment, like we're in a very transitional stage all the time. You have emergency measures that the Commission and the EU is bringing forward because of the energy crisis in Europe. And that gives a feeling to all of us, including, me and you and everyone, that we are still in a transitional stage. And, if I am in transition and, they're giving me incentives to now do that and then do something, why do I need to radically change my energy behavior? And, so I think it is very important to make a strong business case as to why these people need to, for example, adopt energy efficiency measures. Why do they need to closely manage their energy behavior? All these kind of things. And the timing, I think, is important to be now. Yeah. So I think this is the key of what Accept also tries to do is, we have all these tools that facilitate the transition and the participation of energy communities into the energy market and offer services to other parties. But the main thing is to build also the business case and, give them proof that it makes financial sense. Not only, it makes your life easier and also it's viable financially to implement those kind of schemes.
Exactly, and this is what I'm going to keep, that it makes financial sense to everybody, and that Accept is trying to help energy communities and the consumer, the end consumer, to change a little bit her behavior. And for both of us, coming from a country that has some issues in implementing new things, we're both Greeks, I think it's even more important. Ismini, thank you very much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Areti. It was really nice to meet you. Thanks for the opportunity to discuss Accept with you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye. That was really fun.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.